There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean, and welcome back to my newly renamed channel, Sean Breathes Books. Yes, if you hadn't noticed by now, I decided that there was nothing I could do about this face, but I could give my channel a refresh by giving it a new name. So, from here on in, call me Sean of Sean Breathes Books. I'm quite happy with the change, and I hope you are all too, and if you aren't, too bad. I've had quite a week, actually. It's been the kind of a week where pretty much everything I did was bookish, but I hardly did a stitch of reading, so I don't have many books to tell you about. I have one that we'll get to in a minute, and when I tell you about the videos I posted, you'll probably understand why I was too busy to read, but it was supremely bookish without a whole lot of reading, including the other night. I went to a book launch at McNally Robinson with my friend Kathy of this novel, A Simple Carpenter by Dave Margoshes. Dave Margoshes is an American-born writer who's lived in Saskatoon for decades. This is his latest novel, and apparently it's just amazing. What he read from it was amazing. But if you remember a few weeks ago during my chat with Orla Owen about her novel, Christ on a Bike, and I was kind of joking with her that I was nervous to read it or whatever because I didn't want to read a book where Jesus Christ was the main character. Well, the universe heard that and put this in my lap. This is actually a kind of a retelling, or I'm not sure it's a retelling. There is a Christ-like character set in present day who is the main character, and based on what he read from it and what was explained about it, I very much look forward to reading it and eat my hat. Is that the expression? Eat my hat in the process. And yesterday I met a new bookish friend, and we went bookstore shopping. We went to a bookstore out for coffee, had a wonderful chat. You will be seeing him on my channel soon, I hope. Stay tuned. And despite having such a good time with him, it was a bit of a whatever could go wrong did go wrong, kind of a biblio adventure. I had been saving almost a year's worth of bales to take to that used bookstore. You've heard me talk about it many times. Westgate Books. It's the one where the owner so kindly gave me a ride home during a rainstorm a couple years ago. Remember that story? I take a big bag of books in there once a year, and he buys almost all of them, and I don't want cash, I want credit, and I spend all that credit at his store and come home happier with new books to read or bail on. And so I lugged a huge bag on the bus and was daydreaming and missed my transit where I had to get off the bus and catch another bus, and so I got taken all the way to university and had to come all the way back, but I still made it basically on time. But where I got off, because of that circuitous route, I had to walk. It felt like 8 blocks or something, carrying this really heavy bag of books, and that I was in pretty bad shape by the time I arrived at the bookstore. I can't carry stuff anymore. I'm just getting too old and rickety. So then I walked into the store and didn't see the owner, but the staff guy said, "Oh, did you bring books?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, we're not really buying anything at the moment." My face just fell. "But I'll look at your books," he said, "but we're not really bringing much new books in. We have to assess our inventory." And then I soon was informed that this was the new owner. He and his young wife, a young couple. Jean retired 10 days ago, and they took possession, and they're just they just can't take more stuff in until they kind of get themselves organized. And that's totally fine, but it's like, I have to get these books home. He bought one. It was a shitty book from one of the Booker list or something, last year or the year before. And there's a nice comment that just came in that let me give you a live reaction to this comment, because the first line of it is quite lovely. Gronsky Books writes, 2 minutes ago, just found your channel. I love that I've never heard of these books. It's from my most recent book haul. It's always cool to discover new authors. Well, here, and Gronsky Books, welcomed to my channel. Sean Breathes Books. Now, where was I with that story? So I had to get this big bag of books home. Because of that, I only bought 2. I had a $6 credit he gave me for the book he took, so I got a couple books, and then went out for a lovely coffee with my new bookish friend, and had to lug these books all the way home on the bus. So I'm full of aches and pains and complaints this morning, but otherwise in a very good mood. Without further ado, I am so excited for you to meet this week's mystery guest. So this week's mystery guest is a writer who's somewhat new to me and is fast becoming one of my favorite writers, and that is Adam Pottle, a deaf writer from Saskatoon, where I live. Welcome, Adam.
Thank you so much for having me, Sean.
It's so great to be chatting like this. I have been to 2 of your readings, and I have read several of your books, or at least a few of your books. The first book I read by Adam Pottle was his writing memoir called Voice, on writing with deafness, which really had a strong impact on me. And so then I went on to, after attending his book launch for his horror novel, Apparitions, which I've also read and enjoyed. I'm not much of a horror fiction reader and had got my eyes opened quite a bit by reading this. I would like to have a longer chat with Adam about this book and some of his other writing later on, but this was quite a read. And then most recently, I attended the book launch with my mom of Adam Pottle's first children's book, Butterfly on the Wind. And the illustrations were by Ziyu Chen, if I'm pronouncing her name correctly.
Sean, yeah.
Thank you. A deaf artist from China or
Singapore.
Which is a wonderful story. And this book is going to my grandniece, Ada, in a week or so for her 4th birthday. I have one other book by Adam that I'm really looking forward to reading and haven't yet gotten to yet, and that is his novella, The Bus, which sounds amazing. So, Adam, tell us about, give us an elevator pitch for Apparitions.
The way that I usually summarize the premise for Apparitions is what would happen if Frankenstein's creature met Charles Manson. Because that's how I kind of summarize the 2 main characters in that book. Because Apparitions is about these 2 young deaf men. One of them has been held prisoner by his father for most of his life. He's never taught language, he's never taught social protocols, never interacts with anybody. And then one day he escapes. And he eventually meets Felix, who is also deaf and happens to be an aspiring cult leader. And it's what happens when these 2 happen to come together.
That's a very good introduction. You introduce your own novel very well. I believe that the captivity story is based on, sadly, some true incidents of that.
Yeah, that's correct. Throughout history, there have been a number of times where young deaf people have been hidden away by their families. And the reason why they did this was because the family didn't know what to do with them. They didn't know how to communicate. Sometimes they would be in rural locations, so access to sign language or access to deaf culture was not there. And so they would hide them away in bulkheads or in cellars or in basements. And one of the remarkable things that I learned while I was reading these stories was that the deaf people managed to preserve their humanity throughout all of this. And I wanted to find out what that would be like. Like, how do you preserve your humanity in those kinds of circumstances? And my exploration eventually became Apparitions.
We don't want to get into any spoilers, but what more can you tell us about the title?
Well, I called it Apparitions chiefly because there's a line in the book where Felix said, "The world treats us like ghosts until we become ghosts." And that word apparitions, it speaks to me about the way that disabled people are often treated in the world. They're treated like ghosts, they're treated like they don't exist, they're easily dismissed or neglected or ignored. And for me, the true monster in Apparitions is ableism. And that word apparitions to me draws attention to that.
I don't think this is a question, this is a comment. You write so beautifully, Adam, and you take us so deep into the main character and about his experience as a captive, as a deaf young man, and talk about him acquiring being taught really by his friend, sign language, and all of that was just so rich on the page.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
One of my favorite parts or chapters in your memoir, Voice, was about your editing. Sean here. I just want to correct a mistake I made in this part of the interview. Adam Pottle first produced a play called Ultrasound in 2016, as he goes on to talk about. And then later, I believe the musical, the deaf musical, The Black Drum, was originally staged in 2019. In his memoir, Voice, he writes a fascinating few pages about the production, the creation and production of the 2016 play Ultrasound, not the musical, The Black Drum. His answers are very clear. My questions were not, and my references to what's actually in his memoir, The Voice, were not clear. Sorry about that. Musical, which is called The Black Drum, and the script for that has recently been published. So tell us about that.
In 2016, I had a play premiere in Toronto. It was called Ultrasound, and it focused on a deaf married couple. And then after that play completed its run, I was contacted by the executive director of the Canadian Cultural Society for the Deaf in Toronto, and they said, "But we'd like to produce a deaf musical, and would you be interested in writing the script for it?" And I said yes, and I had absolutely no idea how I was going to approach this, because I didn't know what a deaf musical looked like. I'd never seen a deaf musical. There had been productions in the past where songs or lyrics would be translated, like from English or whichever language it was, into American Sign Language or French Sign Language, and whichever sign language it happened to be. But this would not be a translation. This would be an organic story arising from sign language and from signed music. And the idea was so new that within our production, we actually had to come up with a new sign for signed music, because instead of saying signed music, we say side music, side music. And so I had to, like, all of my previous writing tools didn't work. They didn't work for me. And so I really had to, in a way, relearn how to write, relearn how to build the story. And because I say in Voice that I write according to how words feel and how words look. But my previous experiences as a writer, because I was so reliant upon like the English literary tradition, like novel structure, poetry structure, all these different things didn't help me. So I had to approach this in a different way. And I went through maybe at least 10 drafts of The Black Drum before I finally arrived at one that I was satisfied with.
Now it's been published in book form, and I look forward to checking that out. Any chances coming up in the future where we can see the musical?
That's an excellent question, and I get asked that question a fair bit. I hope so, but the problem is it has a large cast, and it would be quite an expensive undertaking. I think that the budget that we had for the first time around was about $600,000. And it was for the cast, and there's a lot of effects on the stage that we need as well. So it's quite an extensive undertaking, but I do hope one day that we can remount it, because the cast that we had, the crew that we had, was amazing, and I would love for people to experience that.
And for those of us that are eagerly awaiting that, you must read the chapter in Adam's memoir about it, because he really brings that whole process, the creative process and the production and the performances, to life. I really loved that. And Butterfly on the Wind. Tell us about that.
Butterfly on the Wind was, I wrote the first draft in October of 2020, and around that time I was something of a notorious figure, because I had had a previous children's book come out with a different publisher, But I had a problem with how the book was illustrated because it contained racist stereotypes. And I asked my publisher, is there any way that we can change this before the book goes out? And they said no. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't promote this book. I don't want anything to do with this. And then I just went on social media. I went on Twitter and I said to people, please don't buy this book. Please don't support this book. And it just happened to catch people's attention, like an author telling people don't buy my book. I ended up doing interviews with like CBC, CTV, the London Times contacted me, Huffington Post, all these different places. So, and I since disowned that story, and I was trying to find a way back. Like how can I revivify the creative process in this space for a children's book? And with Butterfly in the Wind, I kept thinking about the way that deaf people, when deaf people are in groups, when they sign, they create, it's almost like a mini storm that they create. And I don't know, that imagery of wind and of storms, it kind of meshed up with something else in my head, and that was Mothra from the Godzilla films. And those two things just kind of slammed together in my head and created Butterfly in the Wind.
You narrated the story at your book launch in Sign, and there was an interpretation by I don't remember that woman's name, but it was a wonderful experience. It converted my mom into an instant fan of yours.
I'm very happy.
Do you think there's more children's books in your future, Adam?
Absolutely. I've actually already written a couple. Hopefully one day they do get published, they do get picked up.
What are you working on now?
Right now, just beside me right here, I have my new novel, and I've got this one has been a bit of a process for me, and I'll just show you what some of the pages look like. So I have the opening, and then I have handwritten scenes, brand new handwritten scenes that I inserted into the manuscript, and then I'm just typing the whole thing out from scratch right now. And I completely rearranged the book. I like to think that it's better this time around, but time will tell.
So your process is that you always start writing your drafts by hand?
Yes, over the last maybe 4 or 5 years, I've been really focusing on writing my first draft by hand. And the first time that I really committed to that was with Apparitions. And it felt right to me because I wanted Apparitions, I wanted the reader to experience a really deep intimacy with the characters. And because the characters communicate by hand, it felt completely right to me to write that first draft by hand, and that's exactly what I did. And I still have the handwritten manuscript around here somewhere. I'm really glad that I did it like that, and it also helped me as a writer in terms of getting me more invested into the work. It's eliminated that distance, because when you're typing on a screen, there's a certain amount of distance there between yourself and your story. But when you're crafting it by hand, it's the process is a lot better. It's harder.
I'm not a writer, but I have over my life often been a journal keeper or diarist, and I find that when I handwrite, there's something more visceral, and I'm more likely to get down to the truth of what I'm trying to write about more quickly through the physicality of handwriting. The question is, later, can I read my own handwriting?
I have the same question, and I've actually had there've been times when I've struggled for like a couple of hours trying to find out what does this word say, what does this say. But overall, the handwriting process is really valuable. In addition to am I able to read my own writing, the other source of anxiety is I can't save my work. Right? I mean, it's like it's there in a physical copy, but if that physical copy is damaged, what do I do?
I guess a scanner with a automatic feeder that you could scan it every week or every month so you'd have a backup, maybe.
It's definitely an idea, but I also find that fear is another part of the experience.
That's very interesting. You have written in so many different genres. Is there anything that you haven't tried yet that you're curious about trying in the future?
Not at the moment. At the moment, I'm focusing chiefly on fiction, but I have tried my hand at a graphic novel script. That's something that I started just a couple of years ago, and I'm really happy with the results, and my agent is really happy with the results. But the process of trying to publish a graphic novel is very different from publishing a novel. You probably interviewed graphic novelists or cartoonists before, and that's something that I'm discovering afresh. So I'm hoping that within the next year or so, we're able to send it out and attract some attention.
That's very exciting. What have you been reading recently, Adam, that you'd like to recommend to us?
So a lot of the things that I've been focusing on recently have been like horror narratives, because when I was doing my PhD at the University of Saskatchewan, I didn't have time to read horror, and now that I've graduated, that's what I've been doing over the last several years is trying to get caught up. And so some of the things that I've been reading, they include Jack Ketchum. This is just novel read. It's about an old man's relationship with a dog. It's an amazing book. And I've also read 3 other novels by Jack Ketchum. So there was this one, there was The Girl Next Door, Off Season, and Offspring, all horror novels. Another thing that I have read is, I'm reading this one right now, is The Bone Mother by David Demchuk, who's a Canadian horror writer.
Okay.
And he just a couple of years ago released another novel called Red X, which is amazing, fantastic, wonderful writer. I've been dipping into Never Whistle at Night, which
I'm
is
aware
an
of that one.
Indigenous horror fiction anthology. Awesome book. And another one that I've been getting into is Disability Intimacy, edited by Alice Wong. And she did another book a couple of years ago. It was called Disability Visibility, which is another anthology. And the covers look pretty similar. They're kind of a series. Alice Wong is a wonderful writer and excellent editor. It's really worth checking out.
I actually attended the online book launch for Disability Intimacy. It was incredible. It was my first experience of seeing Alice Wong, and I was just mesmerized by her energy and her eloquence.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's awesome. She actually did a blurb for Grace. I'm she's an amazing human being.
Voice. I did. Oh, great. Yeah. Adam, your writing is so important and beautiful. I'm so glad that we had what I hope is the first of many conversations like this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Sean. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. So, I really hope that you'll be seeing Adam Pottle on my channel repeatedly in the future. And I also have these aren't mystery guests. This is Chris and Emily of the Book Cougars podcast, and with a special announcement about a new read-along in memory of the late Jenny Colvin and her wonderful podcast, Reading Envy. Very special guests, dear friends of me and this channel, the Cougars, Chris and Emily, joining us from Connecticut. Welcome, Chris and Emily.
Oh, thanks, Sean. Great to be back.
It's great to have you back. So we are embarking, and really this was an old idea of mine that was given new life and made much more doable by Chris and Emily. And it's about our dear friend and a bookish social media mentor and just a lovely, lovely person, really shaped our reading lives in many ways, Jenny Colvin. And she had a podcast called Reading Envy until her untimely death 2 years ago. I was a guest on it 3 times, and Emily and Chris were guests, and Jenny's been a guest on their podcast, The Cougars, and she was on my channel a little bit. And so we're going to do a read-along in memory of her. And Chris and Emily are going to tell us all about it.
Yeah. So we we miss Jenny like everyone else does. And May is the anniversary of her passing. So we were thinking about your initial idea, Sean, and in some of the conversations we've been having with listeners, Jenny's name has come up a lot lately. So we thought let's do something. And Emily had the great idea of looking at Jenny's Goodreads lists, her TBR, or what she has read, and choosing a book from that to read by July 1st, which is Jenny's birthday, or we're going to extend it to late July because it's already late May. So to ask people to read a book by July 1st is a bit of a crunch.
Yeah, and we did read-alongs with Jenny. We had her on our podcast a couple of times doing read-alongs. She had us on her podcast. So doing a, pick your own read-along seemed like a really good idea. We've all chosen one of the books, and you're welcome to read one of the books we've chosen or choose a book of your own.
And I mean, I think every book that's been published since about the year 1952 is somewhere on Jenny's Goodreads because she was a voracious reader. So yeah, I chose one from her TBR, but people who would like to take part in this way of remembering Jenny, feel free to choose it from her. What she's read, what she wanted to read, wherever you find that stuff, because that's almost every book ever published is there.
Yes, for sure. And her tagline for Reading Envy was, I'll have what you're reading. Yes. And so that's what we thought we would title this is I'll have what you're reading. So we have a hashtag with that, I'll have what you're reading. And then also on our Goodreads group page, we have a discussion thread under our read-alongs category called I'll have what you're reading.
All of that will be linked or listed on the show in the show notes. Absolutely. Yes, I can hear her voice saying that because I mean that she began every episode that way. I'll have what you're reading. Yeah,
yes.
I love that.
The little clinks in the background.
Yeah,
I loved
in
it.
a tea room or coffee shop or
or
something.
the bar. I think she said she was in the bar, wasn't she?
Yeah.
instant bestie when I heard. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can go to that thread also, and if you just want to share thoughts about Jenny as well, and open up a conversation, you can talk about any memories you have or something you've read because of her podcast. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. I mean, and I heard about Sean on Jenny's podcast. That's how I came to know Sean, which is, I think, really cool. And now here we are.
Right.
And she's not here to defend herself for getting us to meet.
Yes, indeed.
I think I might have heard about the book reader suit, a tweet or something from Thomas, but it may well have been on Jenny's podcast, but something like that. Yeah. And the rest is history. Yeah. So tell us what books you've chosen and if there's any special reason why, other than that it was found on Jenny's Goodreads. I'd love to hear that too.
This is mine. It's called This Is How It Always Is by Lori Frankel. This came out in 2011, I believe, and it was her third novel. She's written 5 novels. And, I have to admit, I scrolled through Jenny's. I wanted to read something from her TBR, and I scrolled, and then I scrolled, and then I scrolled, and then I got a hand cramp because there are so many. So when I came to one that had been on my TBR that I really wanted to read, that's where I stopped, and I landed on this one. So I'm really excited to read it. It's semi-autobiographical, even though it's a work of fiction. It's about a family with 5 children, all boys, and the youngest, whose name is Claude, wants to be a girl. So that's what the story's about. Yeah. And Lori Frankel has a transgender child. And so that's part of why she wrote this novel. I'm really looking forward to it. It's one of those that's so highly rated on Goodreads by everyone I know who's read it. So excited.
Nice.
Excellent choice. Chris, what did you choose?
I chose one that Jenny read and talked about when we were on her podcast, right?
Yeah.
It is a nonfiction book called Tides, The Science and Spirit of the Ocean by Jonathan White. This came out in 2017, And Jenny gave it 5 stars. And as soon as she started talking about it, I was like, I definitely want to read that one. She said she found it when she was exploring Orca's Island. I'm not sure where that is.
Yeah, off the San Juan Island.
San Juan Islands.
Yeah.
Okay. So she saw it everywhere down there. And then she read it for Science September that year. So that's why I chose this one. Looking forward to it very much.
Oh, that's wonderful. My first thought about that is Jenny just loved islands. She was so into islands and fiction stories set on islands, and obviously nonfiction about islands. Yeah, it was one of her real deep interests. And when
Yeah.
you said Science September, I'd never heard of Science September, but I once did
Yeah.
a readathon on BookTube where one of the prompts was, what was the last science-related book you read? When I did the video, I said, I don't think I've ever read a science-related book in my life. Oh my gosh.
Unless assigned in school, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, Chris, if you like that one, I may give it a try.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it because it talks about what are the tides, how do they work, but also the history of human understanding of the tide, which
Right.
I think will be also an added layer of interest.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, when we were talking with her about it, I was telling her how when I moved here to Connecticut, I completely misunderstood the tides and did a lot of paddling that year. And I'm surprised that I'm still here to tell the story because it is important to understand the tides if you're going to be on the water. So I'm going to live vicariously through you, Chris, on that one.
That's great. Those of us who aren't reading those books can hear how they make out with them on an upcoming episode of the Book Bookers. Because my favorite part of their episode, and I always seem to be in the same location. I always think of listening to the Book Bookers when I go grocery shopping at a certain place because the distance there and back and how long it takes me to shop, I usually get the whole episode done. And so every time I think of you, I'm thinking of where I am in relation to that grocery store. But anyway, I think it was my first appearance. It was certainly during one of my appearances on Reading Envy. And the format of the podcast was the guest talked about 3 books that they wanted to recommend, and Jenny talked about 3 books that she wanted to recommend, and you go back and forth. And one of the books that Jenny talked about was by Rose Tremaine, and it's called The Gustav Sonata. It was about a gay relationship, and the story was set in Switzerland, if I'm remembering correctly. And based on her recommendation, I read it and loved it. And then I pulled a Simon Savage. A Simon Savage in my books is when I guess a half Simon Savage. A full Simon Savage is you start collecting books by a writer who you've never read any of their books yet, but you just start collecting them all on your shelves. I did a half Simon Savage. I had read one by Rose Tremaine, and then I started collecting. Anytime I'd see one, I'd buy it. And I have never ever, because goodness, it must have been on that podcast getting close to 10 years ago, or 8 or 9 years ago. And I still have never gotten to another Rose Tremaine, despite having almost all of them on my shelf. So when I saw this was on Jenny's TBR, I thought, okay, this is it. And that is one of her biggest novels, Music and Silence. It's a historical novel, and it's set at the court of the Danish king, Christian IV. 1629, a young English lutenist comes to court. And that's all I need to know about it. It's a historical novel. It's quite chunky. And it was published in 1999. And it's got a pretty good rating, I think, on Goodreads. And I'm finally going to read it and think about Jenny all the way through.
Well, she also loved music so much. So that is such a
absolutely did.
Yeah.
Did you ever hear Jenny do that kind of musical throat clearing, or she would kind of get her vocal cords ready to record?
No,
it was almost like doing a scale or something, but with her voice.
Oh, very cool.
She must have done that pre-recording.
Yeah.
So that's one of my special memories of Jenny. So, well, so I hope that we have enticed lots of people to join us. And if you are going to join us, leave a comment on my video. But actually, the best place to leave that comment, or do it, I also leave a comment on the Book Boogers thread about I'll have what you're reading, and that link will be in the show notes.
And if you take pictures and post on social media, use the hashtag I'll have what you're reading, and we can all follow each other.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Yeah, use the hashtag, no punctuation whatsoever. I'll have what you're reading.
Yeah. It's a great way to find other readers and other fans of Jenny.
Yeah.
Because the thing is we know she'd love us all getting together to read and talk about books.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kristen, Emily, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Okay, so I hope any of you, whether you were familiar with Jenny's podcast or not, will take part, but especially those of you who are missing her like we are. All right. So, yes, I've been really busy, not so much in the quantity of videos, but the quality or the effort required to get a couple videos out on my channel in the past week. So I had that book haul, and then I had an interview with the gay American novelist Thomas Grattan, who's a New Yorker, about his new release, his second novel, In Tongues. And I interviewed him last Saturday, so I stayed up late to finish the novel, which was wonderful. More on that in a little bit. To tape it, and then I wanted it to be up on publication day, which I believe was Tuesday. I can't remember now. I think it was Tuesday, maybe Monday of this week. Wonderful conversation, wonderful novel, wonderful writer. And then a day or two later, I put up a panel presentation on five readers. The five of us talked about what Alice Munro meant to us, and then we did a deep dive on one of her earliest published short stories, the title story to her first collection, Dance of the Happy Shades, and that just turned out beautifully. So that is also, and so both of those kept me extremely busy, and here I am, quite pleased with myself. But this is the first week that booktube busyness prevented me from doing really any reading, and I don't want to get into the habit of that, but putting that aside, what a wonderful week I had. So, in fact, now let me move on to a brief review of In Tongues by Thomas Grattan. He's one of my favorite writers, absolutely. I love this book so much. That's the second one I loved so much, and this one, like the recent East, his first one, is going to stick with me for a long time. I can't think of many other writers who write characters, deep, layered characters, the way Tom Grattan does, and the hero in this one was a young gay guy, and he was so relatable, and he was so screwed up, and he was so open and big-hearted in his own way, and not necessarily learning from his mistakes until he'd made them about 17 times, but capable of growth. Talk about a Sean character. Reminded me too much of myself. Thomas Grattan is so fabulously preoccupied with woundedness and joy, and all of that comes through. I don't think I'm going to say another darn thing about it, but I hope you'll read it. It's a wonderful, wonderful novel, and you'll hear more of my reaction in my conversation with Tom, so check that video out. That's the one I finished, and I'm not ready to tell you about any of the books I've recently started. That part of my traditional Friday Reads format is starting to disappear because I just got too many other things that are part of my Friday Reads, and so occasionally I will give a preliminary check-in on a book, but that seems to be becoming few and far between, and that's just fine. But here's an update on James, Percival Everett, the buzziest book of the year for those of us that care about literary fiction. And I told you I was going to start it this week, and I didn't. So I'm going to take it back to the library because it's due like tomorrow. And because I lost a week of reading, I just don't think I'm going to be able to fit this in. So I did buy the audiobook because I previewed the audiobook, and it was just wonderful. So I could do it audio only, but I don't think I want to do that. So I'm just going to give this back, be a good library patron and not keep it past its due date, and give it a try another day. So I have space. I think right now my current reads, remember I have a 15 book maximum, and then at the moment I'm at 13. So I am going to add 2. And I had planned to add 2 regardless, but because I didn't finish any, that was also, I had to jettison James because I just didn't have space for it to stay within my new limit. So here are the 2 I will be starting. First, this is the next buddy read with Heidi of My Reading Life, and this was a book that was originally recommended to me by Amina Kane, and I say recommended to me because she recommended it to me when she was my mystery guest several weeks back, and that is the newly published Committed on Meaning and Madwomen by Suzanne Scanlon. It sounds just wonderful, and it's a memoir, but goes beyond memoir to being kind of cultural criticism and perhaps literary criticism. I can't wait to dive in. This is what Amina Kane's blurb is on the back. This book lives alongside the works of Annie Ernaux Elena Ferrante and James Baldwin, and feels every bit as important for its artistry, for how it doesn't shy away. I love that last part, for how it doesn't shy away. So Heidi and I are diving into this. In fact, our first check-in on the first maybe 100 pages is Monday, so I've got my reading cut out for me this weekend. I haven't talked about Patreon any recently, and I'm always in a very open, welcoming space about inviting more of you to support me on Patreon. The details are in the show notes. One of the benefits for the top tier, the Bibliophile Bestie tier, is the option to do 1 or 2 buddy reads with me during the year. There's now 3 different things they can choose from, and one of them is 1 or 2 buddy reads. And so this is the first one I'm doing now that I've added that benefit to that tier. The Colony by Audrey Magee, which will be familiar to many of you. Wasn't it on the Booker list or something last year or the year before? And I bought it at that time because it sounded really good. Haven't gotten to it, and so I'm going to be doing a pseudo buddy read with the wonderful Alina, one of my patrons who's been a wonderful supporter of this channel in many ways, tangible and intangible, for many years. And so we're going to discuss this book in a Zoom chat, and I don't remember if we've decided that it will get posted here or not, but anyway, that's what we're going to do, a pseudo buddy read of this novel. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed my inaugural Friday Reads video under my new name, Sean Breathes Books. Thanks for watching.